Step back now, Sarah warned, her voice steady, but sharp enough to cut through the tension that hung thick in the air. In an instant, every pair of eyes turned toward her, and the silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't just the glass that shattered moments later, it was the calm of the entire restaurant. The low hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, and the subtle sounds of a busy evening all stopped. For a brief second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Sarah had no choice but to act quickly. She had always been observant, her instincts honed over years of working in places like this, where the world's most powerful people felt untouchable. Tonight, however, was different. Something was off. The group of men at table 7 weren't just businessmen. They were far more dangerous than that, and the way they spoke to one another made her skin crawl. It wasn't just casual chatter. It was too sharp, too urgent. Sarah knew what she had to do, even if the risks were higher than anything she had faced before. Jake, the CEO of a major tech company, was sitting at that table, his back to her as she carried a tray of drinks. She had no idea what was going on in his mind, but she could tell by the nervous glances exchanged between the men that something wasn't right. She had seen this kind of behavior before. She had heard whispers of schemes, deals that turned into more sinister plans, and she couldn't afford to ignore the signs. Her heart raced as she moved closer, keeping her voice low and her movements deliberate. But then, just as quickly, she heard the warning, a man speaking in Russian, a language she had studied years ago. That was all she needed. She knew what was coming. Without thinking, she set the tray down and spoke in a calm, controlled tone. "Step back now," she repeated, louder this time. The group at table 7 paused, their faces flicking toward her, confusion registering in their eyes. For a moment, Sarah could hear nothing but her own heartbeat, thumping in her ears. She had no time to waste. The glass shattered just as she predicted, the sound ringing out through the restaurant like a gunshot. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. The men at the table froze, staring at her as if she were some kind of sorceress who had just foretold their doom. Jake, who had been looking down at his phone, slowly raised his gaze, his eyes narrowing as he processed what had just happened. But it was too late. Sarah had already stepped into action. She had seen the small glint in the man's pocket earlier, something shiny, too metallic to be a phone. It wasn't just a simple dinner. It was a setup. The real threat wasn't the deal they were discussing. It was the danger they had brought with them. And Sarah, the quiet waitress who had always stayed under the radar, was the only one who saw it coming. The moment the glass shattered, she had no choice but to protect them all. She wasn't just a waitress tonight. She was their only chance. As the chaos began to unfold, Sarah stood firm. Her instincts were right, and she knew this was just the beginning. She had already stepped into a role she never imagined she would play. Hero. But how long could she keep her secret hidden?